Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
John Tenpenny, the editor of ReNew Canada, publisher of the Top 100 Projects list.
And we did this last year, but for those of us, well, not us, but those who are listening who aren't familiar with what ReNew is and what the Top 100 Projects is, maybe you could explain what that is.
Sure. Yeah. ReNew Canada covers the public infrastructure sector in Canada. So anything and everything that is built with public funds. And the Top 100 list is an annual list we put out. This will be the 17th edition, and it puts together by project value the top 100 projects, public infrastructure projects in the country from all sectors.
And I remember last year, COVID obviously hit everything, but it definitely hit infrastructure projects in a variety of different ways, even either people not making them or making them. This year was different. It was inflation. It was a few other factors. Some of you can go into what the factors are this year that are affecting infrastructure.
Yeah, well, I think it's still a carryover. I mean, COVID is still, we're almost 3 years out, and it's still sort of affecting. But yeah, inflation definitely. I think what COVID is still doing is probably delaying some projects or projects that were supposed to finish in the last year or two. Most of them have probably been delayed, a year or two, and that's outside of the usual. Big infrastructure projects tend to get extended every few years sometimes. But COVID, I think, has just added to that. I'm not sure if I can definitely say inflation has been a big issue. There were some projects that definitely went up from last year's list in terms of their value is now higher than it was last year. Whether that's due entirely to inflation, I'm not sure. I think in some instances it's just projects as they get going, things happen that add to the cost. But I'm sure you're going to see that as we go along. Although in the end, the total value for the top 100 this year was 273 billion, which was the same number as it was last year. We tended to trend upwards, but so I'm not sure what caused that. But sometimes it's just a numbers game. Projects fall out, and the projects that come in this year, it was just a wash, I guess.
And what were the biggest sectors overall?
Well, in terms of money, transit continues, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. 25 projects, so a quarter of the list were transit projects, totaling over $120 billion. The next closest to that is energy at 50 billion, but that's only 11 projects. But that's because energy projects, hydroelectric, nuclear, tend to be very, very large, such as the Darlington and Bruce Power refurbishments. The building sector had 30 projects at 45 billion. Transportation had 19 projects at just over 28 billion. And our other category, which is largely water and wastewater and remediation projects, there were 15 of those that totaled $28 billion.
Okay. And there are a few projects, the biggest ones that made their debut this year on the list. So maybe you could sort of sum up a few of those.
Well, the biggest new project we had was the Trillium Health Partners Mississauga Hospital development in at $2 billion. Actually, to be honest, the 11 new projects, most of them were under $1 billion, so they weren't massive projects. Maybe that's why it was a wash. The biggest project we lost was the Romaine Complex hydroelectric project in Quebec, which I believe last year was at about $8 billion. So that was a big drop in terms of numbers. So making that up. But of the 11 projects we had this year that were new, they totaled about $10 billion. And most of them actually came in under the building sector. So they, transit and energy, which tend to be the big ticket items in terms of dollar value. The buildings don't tend to fall under that. I mean, the one I mentioned, the Trillium, is a hospital, so that's a building that's $2 billion. We had a couple of federal building projects in Ottawa come in at about $1 billion each. The Place du Portage Renewal Project in Gatineau, that was one of the new projects this year under the building sector.
And so stuff that falls off the list, is that just because it's complete, or what are the reasons that something will go off the list?
Sure. Yeah. So each year we tend to we tend to lose some projects and gain projects. So when we lose projects, yes, that's due to substantial completion. Although I will make a note that's interesting this year, the Metro Vancouver's North Shore wastewater project
Hmm.
is on the list this year, and last year it wasn't. But that was because, as we all know in this industry, they fired their contractor.
Right. Yes.
So the project was basically put on hold last year, so it didn't appear because it was in limbo. They've since hired a contractor and got that project restarted, so it came back on the list. So that is a very, to me, unique. That doesn't really happen very often. So yes, so substantial completion of a project, which we confirm with all the owners. That's why project falls off the list, unless for some reason. Once again, I mean, this is my second one that I've been here for. We haven't had a project outright canceled,
Hmm.
but I'm sure that tends to happen. But usually, because of our qualification requirements, in terms of the project, not just having have to have funding in place, but also have gotten underway in some respect, whether once it's hiring consultants or putting out RFPs or RFQs and things like that. So that tends to mean that the project is underway and going. So very hard, or rarely does it do projects get canceled once they've started laying out money like that. So but to answer your initial question, substantial completion is when a project is removed from the list.
Hmm. And do you see any big trend or big theme in this year's list that may or may not be different from last year's?
It's similar. Last year, healthcare was a big one. There were a lot of new
Mhm.
hospitals on the list last year, and as I mentioned before, this year the big trend in terms of new projects was buildings, but not healthcare. More some healthcare, but more government and public buildings and public projects. Another one new on the list was the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories Advanced Nuclear Materials Research Center
Mhm.
at their Chalk River facility. So things like that tend to be, or where some of the projects are added, or the Thunder Bay Correctional Complex in Ontario. That was we call that social infrastructure, but it's
Mhm.
it comes under the building. So that was another big project that came on this year. So if there was a trend, it seemed to be public spaces, public buildings this year that were added to the list. I might be answering another question, but what I see
That's fine.
coming is I'm anticipating next year the dollar value going up. There's a lot of big projects right on the cusp, just almost to the RFP stage.
Mhm.
And once those get issued, and then they start selecting partners, I'm seeing a lot of big projects coming online next year. A lot of them are from Ontario. The Infrastructure Ontario program continues to roll along, and they have a substantial amount of projects that are right there. Just we're very close to getting on the list this year, but hadn't quite met
Mhm.
the requirements in terms of full funding or having engaged with partners already. So you
And
can quote me
finally,
next
oh,
year
sorry, go
when we
ahead.
have this conversation next year to see if I'm right. But I think that the number is going to go up a good chunk next year with all these new projects.
Okay. And finally, by the time this goes out, the list will actually be out and in the public and available to look at. So where do people go to see the list and to see all the other work from Renew?
For top 100 projects, it's top100projects.ca, and Renew Canada is renewcanada.net. We'll be, keep an eye on our social media channels, LinkedIn and Twitter, for updates once this goes live. And we're looking forward to also, if I can just get in, we're holding
Mhm.
our annual top 100 key players and owners dinner February 21st in Toronto.
Okay.
And this year we've added in May, we're going to have a similar dinner in Vancouver, top
Oh,
100
great.
West, and that's new this year. So we're going to be this is an event where we invite obviously they pay for their tickets, but we invite people from from the industry, all the companies, all the construction companies and consultants that are involved in these projects. And we've been holding the one in Toronto for I think over 10 years. And it's always very, very well attended. And so this year we decided we were going to take it out west, because there's a lot of these companies and other companies based in the Lower Mainland and Alberta that are involved in these projects. So we wanted a chance to for those people to come. And in the Toronto event, our keynote speaker will be the Ontario Infrastructure Minister, Kinga Surma.
Okay, great. Maybe I'll see you out here in May. So thanks again for joining us, John.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me again.